Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I am here today to do a Friday Reads video where you can actually see my face, which is a nice difference from the last two Friday Reads videos where I just, if you follow along, you know, but if you are new here, hi, I have been recovering from sinus surgery to repair a deviated septum, which I had on January 18th. And it has been a long, slow, and frankly disgusting process. And finally this week, I feel a little bit less puffy. The bruises getting a little bit better. So, it's not great, but it's fine enough. So here I am. You can see my face. I did do a video earlier this week where I showed my face again. I looked at the ALA notable titles, which is always a really fun thing to do. I'll have that video linked down below if you would like to check it out, because the ALA list kind of has a correlation to the Pulitzer Prize, but not really, because nothing is a really good indicator of what will win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. But I've gotten in the habit of really just paying attention to the ALA notable list and seeing what's on it. It's always an interesting list anyway. And in that vein, before we get to the Friday Reads portion of this video, which is going to be a little bit quiet because I only finished one book this week. It's been still a process of recovering. I did want to also talk about the Faulkner Award for fiction, because they announced their long list, and I believe at some point in March they will reveal a short list. It does not give an exact date. It just says in March. It will be announced, the finalists will be announced, and then the winner will be announced in April. They don't give specific dates for when, but it's an interesting list, and I wanted to shout that out. The Faulkner is another really interesting prize. I didn't want to do a specific video about this because next week we are going to be getting the long list for the Women's Prize for nonfiction. It's the first year that they are doing a nonfiction prize, and I am hoping that if, all is well here, I will be doing a reaction video to that. I'm also hoping that I will finally get you my January reading wrap up, all depending now that I am able to kind of film, again and show my face. I'm hoping to get a little bit caught up on some of those things. So I didn't think a specific video for the Faulkner Award really made sense. But I want to talk about the list really quickly, because Faulkner does not have a correlation, at least the winner doesn't. The book that wins the Faulkner, there isn't really a link to the Pulitzer Prize, although some people have asked about whether or not that would be a good indicator of what might win. The only indicator is that what wins the Faulkner likely will not win the Pulitzer Prize, because there just isn't much of a connection. However, being on the list for the Faulkner, there's a bit of a correlation. Again, there's no solid indicator for the Pulitzer Prize, but it has happened that the Pulitzer Prize winner has been on the list. So maybe some of these books have a bit of a leg up in that regard. Let's run through the list really quickly. The first book on the long list for the Faulkner Prize is Witness, a short story collection by Jamel Brinkley. I have been really wanting to read this. I would still like to read this before the Pulitzer Prize is announced. I think you would have to consider this a dark horse for the Pulitzer, because story collections just really don't have a good go with the Pulitzer. But it sounds like a really interesting collection. I'm very happy to see it longlisted here, because it's felt like it had a bit of a quiet release, and I'm kind of hoping that more people will end up reading this. I've heard a lot of really good things about it, and I am still really looking forward to reading Witness by Jamel Brinkley again, so I'm happy to see it here. Then you have The Guest by Emma Cline. I did read her book, The Girls, the one that's not Charles Manson, but kind of is Charles Manson, and I didn't really enjoy it. So I have never read another one of her books, but I hear mixed things about her other ones. But The Guest by Emma Cline made the list. Then you have Monica by Daniel Close. And then you have Open Throat by Henry Hoke, which was on the ALA notable list. So again, potentially getting a boost for the Pulitzer. I think it's definitely too out there of a book to win the Pulitzer, but definitely showing up in a lot of interesting places. Then you have The Best Possible Experience by Nishanth Injam, What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez by Claire Jimenez, the biography of X by Catherine Lacey, which was also on the ALA notable list, and which I think you have to consider a contender for the Pulitzer Prize. And then we have the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, which was also on the ALA notable list. Definitely a Pulitzer Prize contender. I'm kind of hoping that this book wins, although Northwoods seems to have the advantage. Although Northwoods is not actually on this list for the Faulkner Prize. Does that give Heaven and Earth Grocery Store an advantage? I don't know. It's so hard to tell. But it is really good to see this book here. I was a big fan of the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, and I know a lot of other people have been as well. Then we have Absolution by Alice McDermott, which I definitely consider a big contender for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, although it had a bit more of a muted release than I was anticipating, and it hasn't shown up in some key areas, but it's here, and it was on the ALA. No, it was not on the ALA notable list, but I still consider it a contender for the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and it's a fun book to show because of the way the light hits it. And then the final book on the long list for the Faulkner Award for Fiction for 2024 is Users by Colin Winnett. I admit I don't really know anything about The Best Possible Experience by Nishant Injam or Users by Colin Winnett. So once I'm done filming, I might go back and look a little bit more closely at those. But that is your long list. I'll have a link to the actual long list down below if you would like to check it out for yourself. And I just wanted to run through that. And then before we get to the actual Friday reads, just, you know, your update. So I mentioned last week that I had what seemed like a sinus infection. Really, sinus infection is the best way to explain how I have been feeling, but it's not actually an infection because I have to do 2 medicated sinus rinses every day, and part of the compound that goes in there is an antibiotic. So I don't actually have an infection, but it feels for all the world like I have a sinus infection, and that is what I have been really struggling with. And I have spoken to the doctor this week, and basically I had a really badly deviated septum that I was living with for such a long time. So they're not all that surprised that I turned out to be one of those people who has a much longer recovery, because my surgery ended up being a lot more involved to fix the deviated septum. So it's just been a process. Show a lot of love for Joel when you see him, because he has been doing a lot of the work around the house and taking care of Teddy, and I'm grateful to him for that. And you know, he's been putting up with a lot because I've also been cranky, and I just have not had a lot of energy at all. Like, my energy level is just 0, and at the end of the day I just kind of pass out and fall asleep. And I actually managed to get sleep. I now that I'm 2 weeks, or since I have been 2 weeks out, I have been able to take cold medicine again, and that has sort of helped with a lot of the congestion, and it has helped me sleep. But I don't feel rested at all, so it's still a process. Hopefully, once I'm on the other side of recovery, things will be a lot better. It has felt so far a little bit like, what did I do to myself? Because this was kind of a voluntary thing to fix a long-standing problem that I've had since I was in like 3rd grade. And the doctor did confirm that this is all because when I was in 3rd grade, I did break my nose. He confirmed that he saw a fracture line when he was in there. So all because I had a broken nose as a kid and it never got fixed. And here I am all these years later getting it fixed, and it's been a miserable process, but I'm getting through it. And thank you all for the support and the understanding. You know, I really, earlier than this week, did not feel like filming or posting anything. And with my face, you know, especially with the puffiness and the bruise, kind of came out of nowhere late in the process. And actually, they said the bruise probably came because last weekend I started sneezing a lot, like violent, powerful, really painful sneezes. And they said that's probably what caused the bruise to finally pop. It's again, it's kind of a disgusting, long, and awful process. But hopefully once I'm on the other side, things will be a lot better. So we'll see, and fingers crossed. So the only book that I actually finished this week was Neighbors, the story collection by Diane Oliver. I finished it a little earlier on in the week. It was a bit of a slow process. I have not picked up a book since then because I've just been so tired and congested that I haven't really felt like reading. So I'm kind of back to where I was at the beginning of January, where I feel kind of slumpy. And I'm allowing that to happen again. I'm not going to try to force myself to read when I'm feeling the ick right now. So I managed to finish it. But what's interesting now is that as I was preparing for the video, I was trying to collect my thoughts about it. And I don't really have any additional thoughts other than what I talked about in last week's Friday Reads video. And in fact, some of the stories in the second half of the collection have already kind of faded from my memory. So the one, definitely, I'd say this is a front-loaded collection. Those are the ones that really stuck in my mind the most. However, I do think it is a very powerful collection. Diane Oliver died very young. I think she was only 22 years old when she died in 1966 in a motorcycle accident. So she was unknown for a very long time. And now a publisher has taken stories that she had published before her death and collected them into a story. And the idea is that they are trying to return Diane Oliver to a rightful place in literary history and establish her as an author who really contributed a lot. And what's interesting is Tayari Jones wrote the introduction, and she says that she didn't know Diane Oliver's work, but she still considers her to be an influence, because in the way that you don't know your ancestors, but they shape who you are, which is a kind of interesting concept. And I think it's a very urgent collection that feels very vital in today's world, which is kind of sad and shows a lack of progress based on, where the world was in 1966 and where we are today. But it does make the story collection feel vital in a lot of ways. And it does feel like a story collection that could have been written now. The way Diane Oliver writes and creates a sense of unease in the reader is really interesting. And I don't think all of the stories works. If you're someone who struggles with story collections, this is not going to be one for you, because it is a little bit uneven. And I think that just goes to show that, these are stories that were written and not necessarily intended to be put together. And they are sort of cobbled together from what she was able to write before her untimely death. So it's not a perfectly even collection. However, I do think it shows a remarkable amount of talent in Diane Oliver. And I'm glad that I read it. I'm glad that these stories have been put together. And it makes great Black History Month reading if you're looking for something. And I would recommend it. But if you are someone who struggles with story collections, this might not be the book for you. So I also really did not make any progress with my audiobook, which was Diva 2.0. I really wanted something comforting, and I turned to this because, some people have RuPaul, I have Cheryl Lee Ralph, and I am continuing to read it. I want to finish it, but I just, again, have not been in the headspace with the way I have been feeling this week to do much reading at all. So I just ended up, days went by and I realized I hadn't listened at all, and that's on me. But also I didn't feel like forcing myself to listen either. And I really haven't been listening to much of anything this week. I didn't spend a lot of time on podcasts either. I just really didn't feel like listening or reading. So I'm kind of glad I finished Neighbors earlier on in the week, because once the slump kind of feeling settled in, it settled in hard, and I am now wanting to get back into it. So I think today I'm going to be spending some time with Cheryl Lee Ralph again. This is an enjoyable book so far. Your mileage may vary. I like Cheryl Lee Ralph. I have enjoyed her on Abbott Elementary. I think she's fantastic in the original cast of Dreamgirls, which I didn't see live, but I have seen in YouTube videos and things like that, and speeches that she has given and interviews that she has given. I just find her an interesting person, and that is bearing out in the book. I didn't realize she had done a movie with Sidney Poitier until I was listening to her book, and where she talked about getting cast in that movie. So she's had a very interesting life as well, and it's a short book, so which makes it kind of remarkable that I didn't finish it this week. But I will pick it back up, and I will work my way through it. And then once I finish this, I'll decide what my next audiobook is going to be. I'm just going to let myself sort of free flow and mood read my way through things. So I don't want to plan too much. And as for my next physical book, now that I have finished Neighbors, I think part of my struggle with Neighbors as well is that it was an e-galley that I was reading through NetGalley. And I just have attitude about digital books for whatever reason. I don't like reading them, and I think that contributed to the longer span that it took me to read the book. So I have other books that I have access to on NetGalley, but I'm going to give myself a break from the digital format, especially with this and the lack of enthusiasm about reading right now, I think I need a bit of a spark, and I shouldn't hamstring myself by attaching myself to a format that I already don't really like. So I thought long and hard, and I looked at the books that I had sort of on a pile and ready to go for a refresher. I really want to read Housemaid of Dawn soon because N. Scott Momaday did unfortunately pass away, and this will be my next Pulitzer Prize project book, but I don't really want to jump into this until I feel back and energized and ready to go, because I have heard that this is sort of dreamlike, and some people have not responded to it because of that, but I think definitely I don't want to be struggling to read when I get to this book. I want to be able to go in feeling energized and ready to go. So not something I really want to be doing right now until I'm back at 100% and ready to go. And then I have 2 library books still. Forbidden Notebook, which I've had for a really long time, and I have it until the end of the month, so hopefully I will get to it before it goes back, and Mean Spirit by Linda Hogan, which I really do still want to read, but again, I feel like this is not the time because of where I'm at. I feel like I need a jolt to help get me going again. So I spent a lot of time last night thinking about, like, well, what would feel good? What's going to get me back into reading? Maybe should I pull out like a Sue Grafton book, my Old Faithful, something like that. And then I realized I have a new book from Matt Cain. And I had sort of put it to the side because I had all of these other things I wanted to get to. And I think what I'm just going to do is table them for now. And this is a long book. It's like over 400 pages, but I feel like I have enjoyed Matt Cain so much, The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle and Becoming Ted, that this is probably everything I need right now to help me get going. And plus, it's a bit of a romance, a bit of a queer romance at that, which I love. But that will hopefully also tie in with Valentine's Day, which is coming. And I'm not a huge Valentine's Day person, but, you know, theme reading always works. So I think I'm actually going to turn to this and try to rev my engine with this, you know, turn to something that will be comforting and sweet. And this just arrived. We had pre-ordered it from a store called Gaze the Word in London, which I would love to visit someday if I'm ever in England. And Matt Cain actually went to Gaze the Word and signed the books that had been pre-ordered. So I have a signed copy, and they have a fun bookmark as well. So that is what I will use when I read this book. And they are such nice people. They're so nice and easy to deal with. I basically just send them an email if I'm ever interested in anything. And if they have the book, they weigh it and tell me what the shipping would be. And then they send it over, and they send it with I've ordered from them a couple of times, and it always comes with a postcard that has just a lovely note from the owner of the store, who is Jim. So this one says, "A signed copy of One Love by Matt Cain is enclosed. Thank you for your order, Jim." They're just lovely, lovely, lovely people. So I love dealing with them and supporting that store, even though I have not been there in person. So I think this is probably going to be my next book, and hopefully it will help get everything back. So, you know, I'm still working my way back, but we're getting there. Slowly but surely, we're getting there. Hopefully, because I'm really tired of being sick. I'm tired of being tired, and I'm tired of being miserable. So, and I'm sure Joel is tired of me being all of those things as well. So hopefully we are going to be getting back on track. And hopefully I will be getting a January reading wrap up with Joel for you soon. We'll see how that goes. By the way, Joel's birthday is on Sunday, so say happy birthday to him. And he deserves a lot of love for taking care of me and Teddy while we have been slowly, while I have been slowly getting better. Yeah, I am very lucky for him to have him. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be having our January reading wrap up soon. And then next week, hopefully you will have the reaction to the long list for the nonfiction prize for the Women's Prize. I have not even thought about what might potentially be on the long list for nonfiction. So if you have thoughts about what you think you would like to see on it, or what you think will be a contender this year, let me know in the comment section down below. I think I'm just going to wait for the list and try to allow myself to be surprised by what's on it. But I think this is very fun that they are doing nonfiction this year, and I can't wait to see what they come up with on that list. And it's nice that we're going to be getting a book prize this early. I think trying to remember what else is. So in March we'll get the International Booker Longlist. I don't think there was an exact date. And then on March 5th we get the Longlist for the Women's Prize for Fiction. So we are already off and running with book prizes in 2024. It'll be interesting to see what we get and how all of that goes. So yeah, thank you as always. I really appreciate your time. And again, I appreciate your patience as I've been sorting through all of this, and I will be back for sure. And until then, happy reading.